So for today's class, we learned the story of the Haitian Revolution. Bearing in mind, this Unit 3 time period, 1750 to 1900, had a ton of revolutions that broke out all over the world. This story is to get you acclimated to these. It's a bit of a case study. But before I tell you the story of the Haitian Revolution, a quick little previous layout, AP World History, for you reality show fans. Hopefully yesterday you got this big point that revolutions have 5 things in common. Number 1, people have to have reasons to revolt. Number 2, you have leaders who solidify and unify people in the revolution. Number 3, they choose methods of change, whether it be diplomatic, nonviolent, or violent. Number 4, when you go against the powers that be, they will respond to varying degrees. Okay, when you go against the hegemony, you go against the power, they will respond back. And number 5, when you make this choice to revolt, your nation, your world is going to be different than the times before the revolution. Fairly simple, but it bears repeating. Now here's 2 more little maxims of history. And if you don't believe me, take these and try to disprove them. I welcome you to do that. Number 1, oppressed people will eventually rise up against their oppressors. You cannot oppress people forever. They will rise up in time. And if enough people are committed to change, in time the change will come. Now, often it's going to take a great struggle and sacrifice, but if you're committed, the changes do take place. Okay, so those are some generalities before we get into the story. And here's a couple primary sources. We have people working in a field and somebody getting hanged. That gives you kind of the general direction of what we're talking about. So anyway, first of all, geographically speaking, the nation of Haiti. Now, Haiti shares an island with the Dominican Republic. Now, there's an island or mountain, on the island that separates the two. Now, in modern times in Haiti, they speak French. In the Dominican Republic, they speak Spanish. Okay, and I've been to the Dominican Republic. I've not been to Haiti, but they're very distinctive countries and cultures because you have this geographic divide with the mountains dividing them on the island, just so you know. Okay, now at the time, the social structure in Haiti had about 20,000 white people, 30,000 free blacks, and 500,000 slaves. Let's start off here with our story. Okay, you got 50,000 free people, and then you have 10 times the number of slaves. Okay, well, you can probably guess what's going to happen in time. Okay, bit of a numerical discrepancy there. Okay, so pre-revolution, French colonists brought African slaves to develop large sugar and coffee plantations, revisiting the triangular trade route where Europeans went to West Africa, took slaves across the Middle Passage, where a quarter to a third died in the process, where they were brought to the Americas to work to get raw materials that were sent on boats back to Europe to turn into finished goods. They took their profit, and it continued. So at the time, there's a lot of money involved in Haiti. 40% of the world's sugar, 50% of the world's coffee. Crazy money. Big money. So this is our starting point. Got a lot of money, and you have this racial divide starting off our story. Now, in the early events, the white planters wanted home rule because of the French Revolution. We're going to learn about the French Revolution coming up. Okay, so at this point, the free people are looking to do their own thing. And again, when you're doing your own thing, you can make more money. Slaves were not involved, okay? However, during this time, we see the French Revolution, we see the U.S. Revolution. Revolution is in the air. And again, word spreads. If one group of people are successful, that influences other people. Okay, now we have this man, Vincent Ojay. Please forgive me for my horrific French accents. I've never taken a French class. Now, he goes to France, okay, and he gets rights for the free blacks. Now, when he returns, Ojay is killed by whites, and then a little more of a graphic, I don't know why I need to be so graphic, but he was chained to a wagon wheel and run over and over for poetic effect or, gruesomeness, okay? So this is a pretty strong signs from the whites who were on the island of Haiti, and whites allowed to rule the colony and keep it peaceful. So anyway, by 1791, we have these guerrilla attacks. And when you cannot fight toe-to-toe, you have to resort to guerrilla attacks. So bands of runaway slaves, known as Maroons, entrenched themselves in the mountains and forests, and they started taking people out. But at the time, they didn't have any real organization. Going back, you need to have leadership. But there was this revolution in the air, obviously, with these guerrilla attacks. Now, by 1791, Dirty Boukman, Dirty Bookman, okay, he was accused of teaching slaves to read, led thousands of Maroons, runaway slaves, to attack plantations across the colony. So at this point, you have your first leader. Now, Boukman is killed, and the revolt falters until they get a new leader. I cannot emphasize how important leadership is. So we have Toussaint. Now, Toussaint, when he becomes the leader, we see the revolution go into high gear. He insisted on discipline and restricted this wholesale slaughter, okay? So at this point, whites decide to fight for independence. Now, you have the slave revolt where bands of slaves, they slaughtered every white person they encountered. They used fire and violence. So in terms of methodologies, the Haitian Revolution was super, super violent to the point it left estimated 10,000 blacks and 2,000 whites dead and 1,000 plantations sacked and set on fire. Okay, and the picture says 1,000 words. You can see, gun, knife, club. This kid's not long for the earth. This person's getting strangled. You get the point. Okay, so anyway, by 1793, we have Toussaint who controls most of the colony. Whites are in prison. Free blacks of color attempt to take power. And the French National Convention abolishes slavery in an attempt to calm things down. Okay, so it worked for a while. Okay, it did work for a little while, but by 1799, the War of the Caste break out, where you have the free blacks, they support France, and they want slaves back, and Toussaint's slave army turns on the free blacks and kills them. Now, America gets involved and helps Toussaint in order to get France out of the area. Now, Toussaint gets this nickname, break through the enemy lines, from the French. So Toussaint was a heck of a leader at the time, okay? However, during the revolution, it's been going on for a while, they're out of money. So he becomes a dictator. So Toussaint, who was really a pretty effectual leader for 6-7 years, changes pretty bad. He reimposes the plantation system. The people that he freed, he puts them back to work to get sugar to raise money. You can guess how well that went over. He gets kidnapped. He's taken to France and dies of starvation in a jail cell. So you can see this initial movement of slaves trying to have some autonomy and these people on the island trying to break free from France. It's just getting worse and worse and worse. It's just kind of descending into chaos. And by 1802, we have a new leader, Dessalines, and it didn't end well. Okay, it was just chaotic, ugly violence, and the French said, "The heck with this. This is not worth it. We're getting the heck out of Dodge. Let's go to Martinique. Here, you want the island? Here, you can have your island with its burnt plantations and its violence and all that kind of thing. Go ahead, we're done." So France leaves, and eventually Dessalines declares Haiti an independent country. He uses an Arawak name, an indigenous person's name, for mountain. And at this point, he starts land redistribution. He gives everybody just a little bit of land so they can have subsistence farming. And the plantation system ends, and it doesn't end well. And Haiti, formerly the richest colony in the world, becomes one of the poorest nations on earth. And in modern times, the poverty is unbelievable. And add the natural disasters they've had. Poor Haiti. They are really hurting right now. So, anyway, in class I gave a little more detail. It's in your book, so I don't want to try to keep these videos less than 10. So that was the story. So to wrap up, again, the reasons to revolt. Slavery is a legitimate reason to revolt. Now, the leadership to solidify the movement. Toussaint was a great leader. Dessalines was not. Again, a revolution's only as good as the leader. Now, the methodology of change, they tried diplomacy. Ojay went to France and tried to talk it out. But again, the Haitian Revolution was a violent revolution. Now, resistance from those in power, they did resist for a while, but at a certain point, they just bailed out. It was not worth it. They've lost too many. It's too much of a headache. Now, the outcome depends on how you look at it, okay? And with the Haitian Revolution, you can see it in different ways. I've had students say, well, it was better because anything's better than slavery, which is a fair point. people use modernize, they use modern context, say, well, Haiti's still hurting. The fact that it was one of the richest countries in the world, and now it's one of the poorest, obviously it's an unhappy ending. I'll leave that up to you, okay? So tomorrow, we are going to work as a group to go through these 6. I don't know why I put 5. So we're going to be learning about the American Revolution, French Revolution, Italian Revolution, what was going on in Peru, Mexico, and Brazil. And then we will pool that together, and hopefully you have a pretty good grasp of political revolutions during this time. So thank you for watching.